We do have another theist on the line, Tyler from Ohio. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tyler.
Hey, Eric and V, what's up?
Oh, well, we're excited to talk with you. What's going on?
Yeah.
What can we help you with today?
So, first and foremost, I just want to say you two are some of my favorite people on the planet. I used to listen to you guys back on Talk Heathen. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Found Eric through Atheist experience. He was like with Matt Dillahunty, but now I'm a Christian, so.
Okay.
Wow, all right. Well, that's interesting. Tell us more about that.
Yeah.
So what, you just want to hear like how I came to the faith? Or?
Well, what did it for you?
Yeah. Give us what convinced you.
Yeah, people always think that, we're having the show just so we could shoot down believers. But if you have something that convinced you and it can convince us, we want to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is it?
Yeah, so for me, I know a lot of times you guys probably wouldn't like these types of experiences, but we'll try it.
Okay, well, we asked, so we're ready.
Yeah, so about a year and a half ago, my entire life fell apart. I'll skip the details for now, but
I'm sorry to hear that.
Fiance left me, yada yada,
Oof.
and I had to move out. I was out on my own. My family connections were broken and whatnot. I went down this rabbit hole of listening to different podcast hosts, and some of them just happened to be Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't really push it, but they recommended, like, if you're having a tough time with life or whatever, read your Bible, go to church, yada, yada. I didn't really care about that stuff. But after another so many months, I actually came across this thing where I don't know if you ever heard of pornography addiction or if you believe that's a real thing.
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah,
I realized
I don't agree that it's a thing per se, but that's an entire rabbit trail we don't need to go down. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, that's something you were struggling with, though.
The reason I brought it up is because I was chronically depressed for years. Like, I was very easy to make angry and such, and all the whole things that come with like certain types of depression and whatnot. But so I decided to quit watching that stuff. And whether or not you believe it, I know you don't. So I'm not here to get into that. But I quit it, and I just started to feel things a lot differently than I used to. It's like my whole perspective on life changed, and I was in a pretty bad spot. But I didn't really hate myself anymore, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And one day, just kind of on a whim, there was this one Christian talk show host that I decided to call and just ask for life advice.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave me actionable advice that I just took, and my life got so much better. And then following that, my brother-in-law actually asked me to come to his church. I went there for maybe 2 months before I really became a Christian, and then it just kind of clicked for me. I don't have a very specific moment, but it just started to all make sense. And one of the things, I guess one of the things that really did it for me was, I feel like not necessarily you guys, but a lot of atheists that I used to listen to. Like I was a huge fan of Matt Dillahunty. I still kind of am. I mean, I love the debate stuff. I find interesting for completely separate reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But I started to realize that the kind of caricature I had built in my head using the things that atheists like say when they're debating Christians was not real.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had this perception of a Christian that they were like bigots, they were hateful, they hated the LGBT community, and what I found was that just wasn't true, and I felt lied to.
Yeah.
And when I felt lied to, I kind of had a repeat angry atheist experience, or angry atheist phase, except I was a Christian now, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Honestly, Tyler, thank you so much for being so open and sharing your story. I know we usually are like, may I save the testimony for another platform? But we asked, and you gave us a really compelling story. So before we jump into anything else, and I think this will be a good conversation just in general, because you seem like a good guy, Tyler, I want to say that I'm so sorry that you were going through all of that horrible stuff. And I totally get it. There is a vibe in a lot of the atheist spaces that is overly aggressive and, yes, straw manning theists, making assumptions that everybody is a certain way. And when we find out that's not true, then that can be very upsetting. I know that for me, honestly, I've never even thought about that side of things before, because I came from a Christian background. And when I would see atheists making claims about all Christians, I would instinctively know that that was not accurate, because I had experiences with Christians for most of my life that defied that. But if somebody was always an atheist and didn't realize that, then yes, that straw man would be really, really tough to tear down. And then when you did, it would be like, well, fuck, what else isn't being said?
Yeah.
That's a legitimate point. That's concerning.
And it honestly has a lot to do with the way that we want to structure things, because we want to show that we can have these conversations without building up those straw men, because it can be really, really difficult to move out of that space, like you said, V.
Yeah. So before we jump into anything else, there's a thing that one person that I really do appreciate, Anthony Magnabosco, does, where if he gets into a conversation with someone and it really sounds like that person needs their faith and is benefiting from it, he doesn't go after it. And Tyler, even though I know that we disagree with probably a lot of the God claims that you agree with now, let's not talk about that. Because here's the thing. I think that you're finding something that works for you, and I don't think that we would agree that things are technically true or not if we got down to brass tacks. But it sounds like you called in to ask about something else anyway, and I would like to move the conversation in that direction, just because I want to get to know you better. If you would like to call back, if you would like to become somebody who calls into the show, I would love to continue this conversation with you. But right now, I mostly just empathize. So let's talk about what you wanted to talk about today.
I appreciate it, V. So I was actually curious. I'm sure I've heard I've heard it once or twice, but I was wondering if you guys were always atheists, or if you came out of it. I mean, you just said you came from a Christian background, and I was wondering what that's like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I was raised a conservative evangelical Christian. I was the oldest of a very large household, and I was raised to expect to be married and have kids, never go to college, never really do anything that would require going out into the world, getting a career. It was very isolationist. I went to a Christian college after graduating high school, and that was already a big step that I had been told multiple years prior that would never happen because I didn't have a dick. And so I finally got to college, and that was a big deal for me. And it was a Christian college, 100%, Messiah University. We had chapel twice a week, went to church on Sundays, multiple classes were required, theology, Bible history. I learned how to translate Koine Greek for a year, and essentially just really dove very deeply into it, and was surrounded by Christians of various backgrounds because it was a non-denominational college. And so I was able to really start asking really good questions that I had not had access to in a more sheltered upbringing. And I was getting answers from Christians of all stripes, especially some very well-known and lauded theologians in the community. John Fia, for example, teaches at Messiah, and he's somebody that a lot of atheists actually engage with. So it was just the process of asking questions of these people and never finding a good answer that started chipping away for me, all of that. I also had what I call an anti-religious experience in London when I was 21, but that's another story. But yeah, essentially, I grew up very Christian, went to a Christian school, did a lot of intense study around some of the greatest minds in my area, at least, in Christianity. And by the time I left and was in grad school, I had kind of put it on the shelf. I hadn't come out as an atheist yet. I hadn't really formulated what my belief system was or wasn't, but I had put a lot of my prior assumptions on the shelf. And then after that, it was just a process of eliminating and doing research and figuring out what worked for me. But yeah, that's in a nutshell my background. Eric, what about you?
Ooh, yeah, it's a long one. It was a death by a thousand cuts. Definitely started off believing it, but over time, yeah, a lot of questions that didn't get answered, and I think I want to be clear that it wasn't like an angry storming away as much as it was just slowly recognizing, okay, the people around me don't really have good answers for things. I think one of the first questions I remember asking was about, how did more babies come about after Adam and Eve? After Cain and Abel, and it just, I eventually I realized, okay, maybe it's just the people around me. They're not doing really well, or they're not versed to give me the right answers. And I wound up talking to my pastor. By the way, Pastor Lance, you're an ass. If Pastor Lance ever listens, he's an absolute ass. His response was just to shit talk scientists and atheists until I agreed with him that he was right. Which just had absolutely nothing to do with anything.
Nope.
And so I wound up later in my late teens exploring other religions. I thought that, maybe there was just something broken in me, or maybe I just needed to find the right one. And so I looked everywhere, and I wound up speaking to a lot of different religious scholars and different, from different backgrounds, different religions. I tried everything I could. I even wound up getting into, some of the more psychedelic kind of, spiritualities that, was really fun. The drugs were fun.
The drugs were fun. You heard it here first.
Be responsible, boys and girls, and everyone else. Just, the drugs were fun for me.
I don't need to be responsible.
God damn it. Anyway, eventually I got into an argument with a rabbi who was like, well, if you don't believe, then just don't believe. And I was like, that's an option? and so that's kind of how I wound up getting here.
Yeah. I think, Tyler, we're going to have to probably wrap up pretty soon, but I do want to invite you to call back. I would love to continue to have conversations with you because honestly, we don't get a lot of stories like yours. We don't get a lot of, hey, I watched your shows, I agreed with you, and here's what convinced me otherwise. But mostly I just want to kind of emphasize that there are assholes everywhere. Like any area in life is going to be full of people who are, unnecessarily mean. And there are going to be people who straw man all the time. I think atheists do it all the time, and it's really frustrating. I had a friend on Twitter just yesterday get dogpiled by a bunch of, well, don't tell me what kind of God to believe in, you Christian hick or whatever. And he's like, I'm a pagan and I have never said that ever. Like, why are you attacking me for this? So yeah, it's horrible, but we should never make decisions about what is true because of what feels good, if that makes sense. And I don't want to push that too hard right now. I would love for you to call back, but maybe something to think about, maybe something we can jump onto on another call about is how do we determine what is true, even if maybe something else feels better?
Yeah. And in the meantime, even whether you wind up agreeing with us or not, shoring up your well-being, taking care of you and making sure that you're in a good place. I think that should be a priority, whether a God exists or not.
Absolutely.
Whether we're right or you're right, taking care of you is really important. I think that without that, it makes everything more difficult.
Yeah. So we're glad that you're taking care of you, and we're glad that you're still here and that you're able to call the show and that we got to meet you today, Tyler. So thanks for calling in.
Wonderful talking to you too. I'll try to call back.
Absolutely. Bye.
Bye.
I liked him.
Tyler was cool. Tyler was a breath of fresh air after a couple of these other callers.
Oh, I had fun with all of them. That was
Oh,
great.
they were all fun, but here's the deal. We are humans with a variety of emotions, and you may agree with the emotions that we feel at any given time, or you might not. You might have gone harder on Tyler and less hard on Chad. You may have, gone even, you may do things differently. Start your own show. That's awesome. You should do that. But for me, I want to empathize with people, and I want to emphasize the fact that you don't have to be mean to be right. Can we just maybe...
Ooh, I think I got to... Oh, it's not loud.
It's not. We need to make the hallelujah a little louder. You don't need to be mean to be right. And you don't always need to be right in the moment. And you don't always need to score that point. And you don't always need to win the argument. And sometimes listening is best because you get to weed out the dishonest interlocutors a lot faster. And maybe the people who really need to talk with you will come back.
Yeah. And people are much more willing to engage with you if they know that you're honestly coming from a good place. So,
yeah, absolutely.